Imagine a man whose weapon is not a gun, a knife, or even poison, but a car. A car built to be indestructible for him, yet a death trap for his unsuspecting victims. This is the twisted reality behind Stuntman Mike, a man whose calculated obsession with control and carnage left a trail of terror across 2 states. Join us as we uncover the dark, disturbing mind behind the death-proof killer, and how his reign of vehicular terror came to a brutal end. It was a typical night in Austin, Texas, bars filled with people enjoying their weekend, friends gathering to celebrate and let loose. Little did anyone know that a dangerous predator was already hunting his prey. Arlene, Shauna, and their friend, radio DJ, Jungle, Julia Lutzai, were out celebrating their friendship, oblivious to the sinister presence lurking in the background. They had no reason to be suspicious as they hopped from bar to bar, laughing, dancing, and enjoying the carefree atmosphere of the evening. But from the shadows, they were being watched closely. Mike McKay, known as Stuntman Mike, to those who met him, was a former Hollywood stuntman who had turned his talents to far darker pursuits. The killer, driving a heavily modified 1970 Chevy Nova, had tailored his car to be death-proof, for himself. But for anyone else? His custom-built vehicle was an instrument of destruction. Rolling cages, harnesses, and reinforced metal made it virtually indestructible, and for Mike, it was a twisted extension of his sadistic desire to control and eliminate women. The car was more than a tool, it was a statement. Stuntman Mike wasn't just a killer, he was someone who thrived on the rush of carnage, his methodical approach to stalking his victims meticulously planned. Psychologists reviewing the case note that Mike's behavior is consistent with traits often seen in individuals suffering from malignant narcissism and psychopathy. His obsession with power and control, combined with a lack of empathy, created a perfect storm for his deadly pursuits. He studied his targets, much like a predator would observe its prey, waiting for the opportune moment to strike. That fateful night, the women's carefree festivities took a dark turn at Garrow's, a local Tex-Mex bar. There, Julia reminded Arlene of a playful bet she had made on air: if a man could repeat a specific line, Arlene would have to give him a lap dance. As fate would have it, Mike had been listening and was more than willing to take advantage of the opportunity. Blending in like a predator stalking in plain sight, Mike watched the women, his calm and unassuming demeanor hiding the violent intentions boiling underneath. To the women, he was just an odd, quirky character, nothing more than a harmless stranger. But in reality, they were already in his trap. When Mike approached Arlene, reciting the magic words Julia had mentioned on the radio, Arlene reluctantly agreed to the bet. What followed was a sensual lap dance, filled with a palpable sense of unease. While the women still believed they were in control of the situation, the tension in the air hinted at the violence that was about to erupt. Mike's calm exterior was nothing more than a mask. Behind it lay a twisted satisfaction, knowing that he had the upper hand. As the night wore on, the group decided to head out to a lake house to continue their festivities. Unbeknownst to them, Mike was already plotting their demise. In a cruel twist, Mike offered a woman named Pam, someone he had met earlier in the bar, a ride home. Pam, intoxicated and in need of a ride, naively accepted his offer, unaware that she had just sealed her fate. Once inside Mike's car, Pam's horror began to unfold. Stuntman Mike revealed his true nature, explaining that while the car was death-proof for him, the passenger had no such protection. The mood shifted from eerie to outright terrifying as Pam realized she was trapped. Desperate, she screamed for help as Mike drove recklessly, careening down dark, empty roads. Pam's panic grew, but Mike, in full control of the situation, took pleasure in her fear. Speeding recklessly, Mike slams the car around violently, leading to Pam's death. Pam wasn't just another victim, she was a symbol of Mike's sadistic need for dominance. His ability to manipulate, control, and kill without remorse reflected a deep psychological disturbance. But Mike wasn't done. Emboldened by Pam's death, he set his sights on Julia, Arlene, Shauna, and Lena, a friend who had joined them later. He speeds up behind them, flashing his headlights and tailgating aggressively. At first, the women think it's some reckless driver messing around, but the situation quickly turns deadly. Mike rams into their car, sending it spinning out of control. The crash was brutal and violent, with the women having no chance to survive. Stuntman Mike, however, Mike survives the collision, his death-proof car protecting him from the fatal crash. The next morning, Mike was found at the scene and taken to the hospital. However, despite Sheriff McGraw's suspicions, there was no concrete evidence to link Mike directly to the intentional murders. The crash was ruled a tragic accident, and Mike walked away once again, seemingly invincible, at least for now. Months later, where Mike would target a new group of women. Zoe Bell, Abernathy Ross, Kim Mathis, and Lee Montgomery, a group of women working in the film industry, became his next targets. These women were different. Unlike Mike's earlier victims, Zoe and her friends were not only street-smart but had experience with cars and stunts. Zoe Bell, in particular, was a professional stuntwoman, giving this group of women a crucial advantage. Mike's repeated need to assert dominance through his car points to a deeper insecurity, a man who, despite his outward bravado, could only feel powerful behind the wheel of his deadly weapon. However, this group of women was not like the others. Their experience with stunts and high-speed driving would soon turn the tables on Mike, leading to one of the most dramatic confrontations in what law enforcement officials later referred to as the Lebanon incident. What started as a fun-filled day for Zoe Bell, Abernathy Ross, Kim Mathis, and Lee Montgomery quickly turned into a harrowing nightmare. Zoe, a professional stuntwoman visiting from New Zealand, had always lived on the edge, constantly seeking out new thrills. On that fateful day, Zoe, in her daring nature, wanted to recreate a stunt from the cult classic Vanishing Point. Known as the ship's mast, the stunt involved riding on the hood of the car while it sped down the highway, a feat not for the faint of heart. Her friends hesitated but ultimately agreed, ready to join Zoe in a day of excitement. However, in a sinister twist, they were unknowingly being watched. The death-proof killer had already zeroed in on his next targets. Stuntman Mike's pattern of stalking and selecting his victims had become disturbingly clear to investigators. He would meticulously observe his prey, learning their habits, movements, and interactions, exploiting any vulnerabilities he detected. His car, a deadly machine, became a tool of both terror and exhilaration, symbolizing his warped psyche. While the women saw the car as a means for adventure, Mike saw it as an instrument for destruction. As Zoe climbed onto the hood of the Dodge Challenger, completely unaware of the danger approaching, Kim, herself an experienced stunt driver, took the wheel. What started as an exciting stunt quickly turned into a deadly chase when Mike's iconic black 1970 Chevy Nova entered the scene. Unrelenting, the killer began ramming the back of their vehicle, pushing it to its limits. Zoe, clutching the belts tied to the car, was thrust into a perilous position as Mike's calculated blows nearly sent her flying. The sheer physicality of the stunt, combined with the escalating danger, revealed Mike's sadistic pleasure in instilling fear. Kim struggles to keep control, but Mike is relentless, ramming their car repeatedly, his twisted grin widening with each hit. Zoe holds on for dear life, her body swinging as the car swerves violently. Mike's heavy Chevy Nova bashes into them again. The chase becomes frantic, with both vehicles careening off the road, wheels screeching, as dust flies up around them. Then, both cars finally spin out of control. Mike, thrown off by his own recklessness, tries to correct his path but ends up skidding to a stop. Kim, seeing an opportunity, pulls out a gun from and with perfect precision, she aims and fires a shot hitting him in the arm. Zoe was thrown from the hood in the chaos but, against all odds, she survived, landing unharmed in a nearby field. Mike's cocky demeanor collapses in an instant. The bullet wounds him, the women refuse to back down, now angry and determined to take revenge. The ensuing chase was nothing short of extraordinary. Both cars weaved through the winding rural roads, engines roaring, tires screeching, and adrenaline pumping. But for Mike, this was unfamiliar territory. No longer the predator, he had become the prey. The chase reached its climax in a stunning display of raw power and speed. Mike found himself crashing and losing control. He emerged from the wreckage, bruised, battered, and terrified, an entirely different man from the one who had confidently stalked his victims. For the first time, the psychological tables had turned, and he was at the mercy of the very women he had tried to destroy. But mercy was not what awaited him. In a final, cathartic moment, Zoe, Kim, and Abernathy unleashed their fury on the killer. Abernathy's final blow to Mike marked the end of his violent spree. The man who had used his car to wreak havoc on unsuspecting women now lay down, his reign of terror brought to a swift and decisive conclusion. But ultimately, it was Mike's underestimation of his final victims that led to his downfall. The women fought back, turning Mike's deadly game into a fight for their lives, and they won. If you thought this case was shocking, stay tuned, we have more stories of darkness, survival, and triumph in the face of unspeakable evil. Don't miss out on the next chilling case we'll dive into.